Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services. Madam Secretary, please proceed to call the roll.
Senator Lang, Senator Wynn, Senator Stone, Senator Titus, Chair Donate.
And I'm here, and then please mark Senator Lang present when she arrives. She's at another bill presentation. We have quorum. Good afternoon, everyone. We have a few bill hearings today for Senate HHS and our work session. So here's the order that I have for the bills. I have AB 169, followed by SCR 5, followed by AB 188. Right now, I have the work session at the end. It just depends because a few of our committee members have to step out and one has to come from another bill hearing. So we'll have the work session at one point. Just don't know when. Having said that, the few housekeeping items is that I will be depending on how today goes, we may have to take items out of agenda order, which I just mentioned. And we ask that if folks have comments to please keep your testimony to 2 minutes each, just because of the different things that we have going on. For the sake of time, we also have imposed a 10-minute requirement for bill presentations. If you would like to provide public comment for any of the bills coming forward today, we ask that you please keep it under the 2-minute mark, as we just mentioned. And if you're not able to provide public comment, or you'd like to provide more consistent public comment as to the 2 minutes, you can submit that to our committee staff. We ask everyone to please sign in at the front of the room so that we can keep track of everyone inside the building. And then when testifying, please turn the microphones on to speak and off to listen. And anyone who wishes to receive copies of the committee's exhibits can go online to the Nevada Electronic Legislative Information System. And finally, we ask everyone to please turn off their cellular devices. So we're going to begin, as I mentioned, with Assembly Bill 169. So I'll go ahead and invite Assemblywoman Gorlo to please come forward. This bill revises provisions governing the labeling of feminine hygiene products, so I'll go ahead and open the hearing, and please begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair Donate and members of the Senate Health and Human Service Committee. For the record, I am Michelle Gorlo, representing Assembly District 35. It is my pleasure to present to you Assembly Bill 169 concerning the labeling of feminine hygiene products. And with me today is Kelsey Lamp, who is a UNLV law student and the person who brought this issue to my attention. Assembly Bill 169 requires that package or box containing a feminine hygiene product for sale or distribution in Nevada must bear a label containing a plain and conspicuous list of all ingredients in the feminine hygiene product. I will turn it over to Ms. Lamp, who will provide you with a brief overview of the importance of this policy, and then I'll walk you through the bill when she is done, if you so desire. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chair Donate and committee members. For the record, I am Kelsey Lamp. As previously mentioned, I am a law student down at Boyd. I originally began this project as an assignment in one of my law school classes. Excuse me. As I did more research, I discovered the vast potential dangers of using certain feminine products. In January of this year, for example, Thinks Period underwear, which are specifically marketed as being safe and better for menstruators, settled a lawsuit for fraud and deceptive business practices. The lawsuit followed from a third party testing the underwear and discovering the presence of PFAs in the products. PFAs are man-made forever chemicals that have a negative health effect on people. I humbly urge this committee to support AB 169. I am a childhood leukemia survivor. My mother is a thyroid cancer survivor, and my great-grandmother was a breast cancer survivor. So I deeply understand how illness can disrupt and devastate lives. While illness can strike for no good reason and by no cause but bad luck, some of the products that menstruators use regularly to get them through their daily life while they are bleeding have the potential to cause short and long-term health issues. To name a few, ulcers, rash, endocrine disruption, reproductive toxicity, and cancer. The presence of certain ingredients in feminine products can cause issues in the female reproductive area that may not be caused when they come in contact with skin or they are ingested. This is because the products come in contact with this reproductive tissue, which is made up of mucous membrane. Unlike something you swallow, substances that come in contact with these organs do not go through the body's typical elimination and metabolic processes. Instead, the chemicals are absorbed by the mucosa and from there can pass almost directly into the bloodstream. Per the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the FDA categorizes menstrual products as medical devices. This means the products do not have to be labeled with their ingredients. And any recommendations the FDA makes about chemical levels are simply recommendations. They do not have to be followed. The purpose of this policy is to provide information transparency so menstruators can make informed decisions about what they put in their bodies. With this added transparency is our hope that there will be an increased demand for products with natural ingredients. So far, only 2 other states have passed this legislation, California and New York. And I believe AB 169 presents a wonderful and important way for Nevada to show that it supports female reproductive health and transparent consumer choice. Thank you, and I'll pass it over to Assemblywoman.
Okay. Thank you very much. You all should have the proposed amendment 3644, the first reprint. There should be a mock-up that you all have. We've worked very diligently with the Center for Baby and Adult Hygiene Products, which represent many of the manufacturers of these products. And we've worked really hard with this organization, making sure that we include items that they are looking for. They've asked us to model our language after California so that it could be uniform. Apparently, we'll just say the other states gone a little rogue, and so they asked us to make our legislation like this. And we even had another conversation prior to this committee hearing earlier today. Real quick, you will notice that in section 1.5 there was a typo. It's not does, it should be dose. And in section 2.3, and I believe legal can help with this as well because he was on the phone call today. We have to change that section and separate it out. The part of the combination of substances is confidential business information. We can't have a definition and rules in the definition. Yeah, so we have to separate those out. Did I get that right?
Eric Robbins, LCB Legal, not quite. So the issue is actually in section 3 of the bill, and basically just the industry representatives from the organization Assemblywoman was talking about, just wanted the last sentence there. If the ingredient is confidential business information, the ingredient may be identified by its common name, separated out into its own subsection so that it was abundantly clear and set forth. So, and we don't have any problem with that in legal.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Michelle Gorlo for the record. And if I'm also correct, in section 3 to B, we're changing the may, where it says if the ingredient does not have a standardized nomenclature, the ingredient may be identified, to a shall be identified. And that was per Procter & Gamble. And we're available for any questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Committee members, do we have any questions on this bill? There's 2 amendments, right? There's one that's the mock amendment, and then the other one is co-sponsors. Okay. Vice Chair Nguyen.
Thank you. As long as you're making amendments, if you wouldn't mind amending me to the bill, I would love to be a co-sponsor.
For the record, Michelle Gorlo, and we would love to have you as a co-sponsor, so thank you very much.
Any other questions, committee members? Senator Stone?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation, and thanks for coming into my office and chatting with me about the bill. Just a few questions. Are there any specific products that have specific ingredients that you're targeting with this bill, or are you aware of any rejections, if you will, that cannot go into California today because it has a certain particular ingredient in it?
Thank you for the question. For the record, Assemblywoman Michelle Gorlo. I don't think it's so much of a specific ingredient shouldn't be in. However, there are some women who may be allergic to certain products, and it's to allow them that information to know that this product contains something that may irritate them.
And I think that's valid. And then who's going to be defining whether a chemical additive, a fragrance or excipient is considered to be dangerous, carcinogenic? What source are we relying on to give us that information?
For the record, Assemblywoman Michelle Gorlo, that is an excellent question. I think I'm going to ask legal on that because it was one of the things that we were questioning. We couldn't include the California list because that's not the way we write laws here.
Right.
We do have a Nevada list. It's slightly different, but it's my understanding that the California list has more chemicals on it than what the Nevada list does. But if legal wants to weigh in on that, I hope you've got a better answer or how close I am.
Well, Eric Robbins, LCB Legal. So we have the well, I guess to start off with, the operative provisions of the bill are in Section 3, and it just requires the listing of these ingredients, and it talks about how they're going to be listed. So it isn't really, I guess, as the list would have to have all of the ingredients on it, but then I believe that basically the list has this provision about confidential business information, and then let's see. Oh, here we go. The fragrance ingredient term in section 2.1 talks about if it's present in certain concentrations on a designated list, which is then defined in section 1.5. So that is where we in section 1.5 is where they talk about kind of who is going to identify these things that may be carcinogenic, and it is basically a bunch of federal and state agencies, and then also a fragrance allergen included in this European regulation as it existed on January 20th, 2023. So it wouldn't be that the European Union would, have authority to adopt requirements binding in Nevada forever. It's just the state saying that we're adopting this regulation as it exists now. So those would be the sources of, what types of ingredients would be considered dangerous or allergenic.
So is it fair to follow up and say that these are reputable federal government agencies that have studied these products and have determined the safety and efficacy of these ingredients?
Eric Robbins, LCB Legal, for the record. I believe so, except with the caveat that we do have one that allows a state agency in Nevada to do it, and then there's this EU regulation about allergens. But yes, all governmental reputable sources.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, I think we discussed this too, is that when you're a big company like Procter & Gamble, the last thing you want to do is have to have 50 different labels and different labeling going to different states. In our discussions, I think you told me that we wouldn't require any unique labeling in Nevada, that it conforms with, maybe it's not as expansive, but it conforms with what the labeling would be in California. Great.
For the record, Assemblywoman Michelle Gorlo, that is correct. We work very, very diligently with the BAHP, I forget that acronym, sorry. But we've worked very diligently to make sure that these were as similar as possible so that it wouldn't create a burden on them. And as of today, they were happy with what we've done.
I'm sure the industry really appreciates that, and I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And really, I have a question for legal, then I have a question for the presenter. So, and this particular bill, the way it's written under section 1.3, it refers to 1.32B, the European Union Cosmetic Regulation. Do we have any other laws that we refer to a European or other countries' laws that we would emulate our laws on?
Eric Robbins, LCB Legal, for the record. I am unaware of any, but again, as I stated, this isn't delegating permanent rulemaking authority to the European Union. Rather, it is saying that we adopt these standards as they as they currently exist. And although I'm not aware of any referring to standards of a foreign government, sometimes we do references to like nonprofit kind of organizations and things like that. So it's not unprecedented to adopt by reference a standard prescribed by a non-Nevada governmental entity.
And then my follow-up question on that can be answered by whomever it is appropriate for. The one reference further on in the next 1.5, number 6, it refers to something to like a right to know, an environmental thing from 1986. And my point of bringing this up is that the rules listing, they change. And so I was trying to find the language that says, to stay current with this stuff. And so you hate to put into law things that are forever changing. And in the past, I've seen wording like current standards or as updated, or a little caveat that it can move as the regulations move or the list moves. And I don't see that language to allow for the currency of this. And I'm just wondering if it's in there and I'm just not seeing it.
Eric Robbins, LCB Legal, for the record. No, that language is not in there, and that is because for the federal standards, like when we refer to federal law, that it's kind of just assume that it would update with the federal publications, and then with regard to the European Union regulation. That we can't put that in there, and the reason is because that would be delegating authority to regulate in Nevada to an entity that is not part of the Nevada government and has no accountability to Nevada voters, so that can't go in there.
Great, thanks for the clarification. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Let's move on to testimony. If you are in support of this bill, please come forward, both here and in Las Vegas. Seeing none here or in Las Vegas, BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in support of AB 169, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Thank you so much, Chair and the committee. My name is Shelby Forth. I'm calling from Battleborn Progress. We are in strong support of this bill so that all people who use feminine hygiene products or menstrual products are able to make smart decisions about the items they are placing in and or around their bodies. We hope that you all will support this bill today. Thank you. I would like to vote for this item.
Excuse me, can you state your name for the record, please?
Bonita Cooper.
Okay, please begin with your comments.
I would like to vote for this. I believe that it should be a mandatory thing that we are receiving products that are products for women menstruating and other products like that. I believe that we should have that donated or free. And that's it.
Thank you so much. And if you could send your comments in writing, we'd greatly appreciate it. You were cutting off in just a little bit.
Okay.
BPS, is there anyone else?
One moment, Chair. Caller ending in 551, you are unmuted and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brianna Scamilla, and I'm calling in on behalf of Planned Parenthood Votes Nevada in support of AB 169 because we believe that all people who utilize menstrual products deserve to know what they are exposing their bodies to so that they can make informed decisions about the products that they choose. We urge your support. Thank you.
Caller ending in 551, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Chair, there is no additional support testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to opposition testimony. If you are opposed to this bill, please come forward. Seeing none here or in Las Vegas, BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in opposition to AB 169, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers to provide testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. And anyone willing to testify neutral, please come forward. Seeing none here, BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in neutral for AB 169, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers to provide testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. Assemblywoman, did you have any closing remarks? All right. We'll go ahead and close the hearing on this bill, and we will now proceed to our next agenda item, which is SCR 5. So I'll invite folks to come forward. I'll go ahead and open the hearing on this bill. Senate Concurrent Resolution 5 urges the expansion of comprehensive cardiovascular screening programs and directs the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Health and Human Services to conduct a study concerning such programs. We know this was Senator Lang's bill, but her co-presenters are here, so please begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Edith Duarte, for the record, with Strategies 360 today, representing Novartis. I did get the sponsors' talking points, and so I can go through them through my testimony. She is in another hearing, but the show must go on. So, again, Edith with Novartis. Novartis is an innovative medicines company that supports efforts to improve the quality of life in Nevadans and health outcomes for all residents. The CDC states that healthcare professionals in Nevada have diagnosed 8% of adults in the state with symptoms of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Symptoms include angina, stroke, heart attack, and coronary heart disease. However, many Nevadans have yet to be diagnosed, particularly in the underserved communities. So the resolution does two things. First, it urges Nevada state agencies to expand comprehensive cardiovascular screening programs to allow for earlier identification of patients at risk of cardiovascular events. Two, it explores ways to collaborate with federal agencies, national organizations to establish or expand comprehensive cardiovascular screening programs. evaluate programs to improve cardiovascular health, which are operating healthcare programs who are operating in the state for the purpose of accelerating improvements in the care rendered to patients with cardiovascular events, and develop policies to reduce the number of Americans who die as a result of cardiovascular disease. There is also an interim Health and Human Services study, which we are committed to work with the American Heart Association, and she will be speaking about the study.
Good afternoon, Chair Dunyate and committee members. For the record, my name is Caitlin Gachanyan. I am the Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association. First, I would like to thank Senator Lang for sponsoring this bill and making cardiovascular disease a priority for the state. And if you didn't know, May is also American Stroke Awareness Month. The American Heart Association is happy to present and support SCR5 because cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer worldwide in the U.S. and in Nevada, and these screenings would help save lives. The screenings are important for patients because we want to provide a complete picture of their cardiovascular risk. By prioritizing cardiovascular screenings, patients will also be able to know what undiagnosed medical conditions they may be experiencing and not realize it. An important aspect of lowering risk of cardiovascular disease, also called coronary artery disease, is managing health behaviors and risk factors, but to know which risk factors a person has, they need to conduct a screening test. Ensuring Nevadans are able to access screenings will help them identify issues that can help them seek preventative care, but Nevada can also take steps to improve the quality of care Nevadans are receiving. The American Heart Association supports a program called Get With the Guidelines. Under this program, they would work to improve health outcomes and quality of service delivery at hospitals. Get With the Guidelines offers hospitals evidence-based guidelines in the following areas: stroke, heart failure, resuscitation, AFib, coronary artery disease. And the Get With the Guidelines system is associated with improved efficiency of care and thus lower costs through decreased lengths of stay. The American Heart Association is proposing an interim study to look at Nevada's hospital and healthcare systems that are practicing Get With the Guidelines strategies. The intent of the study will help Nevada policymakers to better understand gaps in the delivery of evidence-based service delivery. The committee can make recommendations on how the state can make improvements and close gaps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes your presentation. Any questions? Senator Stone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, how can you not support something like this? Obviously, we want to have better access to cardiovascular care. You mentioned it. It's cardiovascular issues, heart issues are the #1 killer, not only in the United States, but the world. And better intervention, better access to people getting tests to find out if they're at risk for one of these problems is certainly admirable. Who is going to be, forgive me, but Health and Human Services is going to be implementing the study, is that correct? And I assume there'll be a budget issue from Health and Human Services to cover the cost of that study?
So just to clarify, and I can have our legal counsel answer that correctly. So the way that the legislature is structured for studies is each chamber gets a certain allocation of the studies that they want, which would require, say, a commission, et cetera. Or you could direct the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Health and Human Services, which the Senate will chair during the interim, to take on this consideration. And I did ask the bill sponsors to perhaps give us more specifics as to what legislation they're intended to perhaps turn into a BDR for next session, because we do have to consider that. But usually it's taken on the ownership of the standing committee and the staff. So I don't know if our legal counsel wanted to also.
Yeah, Eric Robbins, LCB Legal, for the record. So if it's going to go in this bill, actually, it would have to be the Joint Interim Standing Committee, because if the legislature is going to direct the executive branch to do something, then it would have to be in a regular bill, not a concurrent resolution. So yeah, this would be the Joint Interim Standing Committee that would do it.
Any other comments? Okay, I think we're ready to open it up to testimony. If you are in support of this bill, we ask folks to please make their way forward. And we'll start here in Carson City. Ms. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Member of the committee. For the record, my name is Katie Ryan with Dignity Health St. Rose Dominican. We are a Get With the Guidelines member, and we're here in support of SCR 5. And I'm also a member of the American Heart Association's Advocacy Committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in Carson City? Seeing none here or in Las Vegas BPS, is there anyone virtually in support?
If you would like to testify in support of SCR 5, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller ending in. My apologies. Please proceed.
I'm sorry. My name is Bonita Cooper. I'm 62. I was diagnosed with a heart condition, and it took a couple years for me to figure out what my condition is. I really want this bill to go forward, to especially for people that have hereditary heart disease. So I am for this bill. I'm not sure if how long I'm going to be around, but I do feel that's very important for us to continue research on this, especially if it's a hereditary thing.
Thank you, ma'am,
Did you
for
hear
your
me?
comment. It sounds like you've been cutting out, so if you can send your comment in writing, we'd greatly appreciate it. Or
Okay,
maybe,
so where do I send it?
we can hear you now if you want to. There was the last portion of your comments were cut off.
Okay. What I was saying is that hereditary, I believe that it should be mostly people that have a hereditary heart disease like I do, because it took several years for me to finally get the diagnosis, and also the insurance wasn't covering a lot of it. So I'm really in a battle right now with my insurance, changing insurance to get my treatment. So I really feel that this bill should pass. Did you get that?
We got it. Thank you so much. We appreciate your comment.
Okay.
Thank
Sure.
you. BPS, is there anyone else?
One moment, Chair. Caller ending in 870, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and begin. Chair, it looks like the caller is not unmuting to speak. Would you like to proceed and move forward?
Thank you. Let's proceed.
I'm unmuted now. It wasn't working. I'm
Oh,
on.
please begin.
I'm unmuted now. It wasn't working. Hello?
Please begin.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please begin.
Oh, thank you. This is PJ Belanger. I'm a certified health educator, certified wellness educator, certified in kinesiology. I've been studying natural healing since I was 16 years old, and I am now 60. I've been battling autoimmune diseases my entire life. one of which is causing problems to my heart. I'm dealing with Graves' disease and goiters on my thyroid right now, and I survived 2 heart attacks in 2019. I strongly support this bill because if I had known prior to 2019 that the autoimmune diseases I was dealing with were going to be affecting my heart, I could have prevented the heart attacks perhaps, except the first one was medical trauma induced during a colonoscopy. But the second one was not. And I would like to support this bill because even now, dealing with AFib after surviving the heart attacks, it's very important that I not only know what's going on with my heart, but whatever lifestyle changes I can thwart any further problems in the future. And I think I heard that explained in the presentation as well, which is very exciting as a nutritionist and a natural healing educator. I believe that that's really a big part of the equation as well. So I thank you guys very much for bringing this to the table, and thank you, Chairman Donati. Thank you.
Good almost evening, Chair Donate and members of the committee. My name is Matthew Wilkie, Matthew Wilkie for the record. And I'm a 13-year local area pharmacy professional. I'm calling in full support of Senate concurrent resolution urging state agencies to expand comprehensive cardiovascular screening programs. As we all know and have heard, cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in the United States, and it is crucial that we take proactive steps to identify patients at risk of cardiovascular events earlier. I applaud this resolution and urge the committee to pass it. Thank you so much for your time.
Chair, there is no additional testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to opposition. If you are opposed to this bill, please come forward. Seeing none here or in Carson City or in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in opposition to SCR 5, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, anyone willing to testify in neutral on this bill? Seeing none here or in Las Vegas, BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in neutral for SCR 5, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. Any closing remarks? Nope. We'll go ahead and close this hearing on this bill, and we'll move on to Assembly Bill 188. So I'll invite the sponsors of the bill to please come forward. As they're coming forward, so just to keep track for folks that are following along. So we'll do this bill presentation. Depending on how we go, how fast it goes or how slow it goes, may dictate what we end up doing. If we do not have the committee members back yet because there are either in other bill presentations, et cetera, we may have to recess until they come back to do the work session. So just wanted to give everyone the heads up. We are now again on Assembly Bill 188. This bill revises provisions governing the investigational treatments, and we are happy to see Assemblywoman Kasama with us here today. So please begin when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I'm pleased to see that there are still some of the senators sitting here to hear me, and appreciate all the committee members and the hardworking staff as well. So I am Heidi Kasama, representing Assembly District 2 in the Las Vegas area, and today I am honored to present, along with my colleagues, Assembly Bill 188, a critical expansion of the current right to try laws. This bill seeks to address the pressing issue faced by patients diagnosed with life-threatening diseases or conditions who have exhausted all approved treatment options. The Right to Try Act, both at the federal and state level, has long provided these patients with the opportunity to access investigational treatments. However, it is now time to evolve and adapt the law to the changing landscape of medical innovation. As we stand here today, advances in medical technology have led to the development of personalized treatments based on an individual's genetic information. These treatments are becoming increasingly vital for patients with rare and ultra-rare diseases who have been left with no other options. Unfortunately, the current FDA regulations are not well suited to handle these cutting-edge personalized treatments, often acting as a barrier to life-saving medications that patients desperately need. It is our responsibility to address these shortcomings and create a more flexible and patient-centric regulatory framework. Assembly Bill 188 represents a significant step in the right direction. By building upon the success of existing right-to-try laws, this bill aims to foster an environment that gives access to the latest cutting-edge technologies, enabling patients to access therapies specifically tailored to their genetics. Across the country, patients facing terminal illness have been able to access treatments that have undergone basic FDA safety evaluation, but have not yet been fully approved, all thanks to the Right to Try laws. These laws have improved and saved the lives of individuals suffering from illnesses such as cancer, ALS, and now COVID-19. Medical innovation is rapidly outpacing regulations that were established decades ago for a very different era of medicine. The FDA's approval process was not designed with individualized treatments in mind, and as such, it can take an unacceptable amount of time for these life-saving medications to reach these patients. In conclusion, as lawmakers, we need to recognize and adapt to the ever-evolving landscape of medical treatments. By expanding the Right to Try law through Assembly Bill 188, we can ensure that patients in dire need have access to the most advanced, personalized treatments available without being hindered by outdated regulations. Let us put patients first, allowing them the right to try and fight for their lives. I would now like to turn over to my esteemed colleague, Senator Marilyn Tondero Loop, for a few comments, and after that, I'll introduce the next presenter.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman, and good afternoon, Chair Donate and Committee Member Stone. Welcome. For the record, I am Senator Tondero Loop from Senate District 8 in Clark County, and I'm honored to be here to present Assembly Bill 188. Today, I want to express my sincerest gratitude to the tireless efforts and unwavering dedication that have been poured into AB 188. 188 represents a significant milestone in our ongoing journey to adapt and evolve the law to meet the changing landscape of medical innovations. By fostering an environment that provides access to cutting-edge treatments tailored to individuals' genetics, we can offer hope to those with rare and ultra-rare diseases who have been left with no other options. I would just note that when I did the multiple sclerosis bill, this is one of those types of diseases that we need some other options for and some other ways to produce. I would also like to thank everyone involved for their hard work and dedication. I'm honored to be a part of this effort, and I'm confident that our collective resolve will propel AB 188 toward its success. And I would just like to make another note that I have known Mrs. Whittemore, who is in the audience, probably almost as long as I've been alive. And with that being said, I absolutely trust her, her rare and unusual concern for those with other diseases, and has spent a lifetime doing some of these things for other people that need these treatments to get better or to live with the diseases they have. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll be done. Chair.
Thank you so much. I would like to now introduce Naomi Lopez. She is the Vice President for Healthcare Policy at the Goldwater Institute, and she will have her remarks and go through the bill.
Thank you, Naomi Lopez, Vice President of Healthcare Policy at the Goldwater Institute, for the record. Good afternoon, Chair Donate and members of the committee. My name is Naomi Lopez, and as I mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Healthcare Policy at the Goldwater Institute, which is based in Phoenix. I am grateful for the opportunity to present my testimony on this critical issue of protecting the right to try to save one's own life without first having to beg the federal government for that permission. I'll briefly present an overview and the proposed preamble to the bill, as well as a discussion of the bill. Imagine a scenario where there's a revolutionary treatment for a rare disease. It's tailored to your own genetic profile. It offers you a glimmer of hope. However, you're unable to access it despite your doctor's recommendation, all due to outdated federal regulations that hinder the approval of such groundbreaking genetic treatments. Today, Nevada has a golden opportunity to spearhead change and save lives, just as it did in 2015 with the original Nevada Right to Try law, by advocating for new legislation called Right to Try for individualized treatments. The federal barriers to life-saving treatments are real. Nevada has already demonstrated leadership with its original Right to Try Act, which was enacted here in 2015, when it granted patients the right to seek treatments deemed safe enough for clinical trials. This federal act was signed into federal law in 2018 and remains in force, and it is working today. There is an important opportunity to provide a new pathway that would accommodate today's rapid advancements in medicine, such as gene therapy, which are not covered by the original law. This is where Right to Try for individualized treatments, or Right to Try 2.0, comes in. This proposal does not alter the functioning or future success of the original Right to Try law. Instead, it establishes a new, secure, and physician-directed pathway for those patients with rare and ultra-rare diseases who lack treatment options in clinical trials and whose doctor is recommending a personalized treatment. Under this proposed legislation, patients may seek the recommended treatment from a facility operating under a current federal-wide assurance, which ensures compliance with federal laws and regulations governing human subjects' protection in research. This well-established system offers additional safeguards for patients. Nevada can continue to lead in providing the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. Assembly Bill 188 not only removes government red tape, which limits patients who are under their doctor's care from seeking 21st century treatment options, patient safety and informed consent are ensured without additional taxpayer investment as well. Nevada lawmakers possess the authority and the legislative vehicle to harness the potential of today's medical innovations that would further benefit patients. There is a proposed preamble to this bill that was drafted by Senator Doñate and Representative Kasamba. The purpose of the preamble is to establish the importance of doctors adhering to federal regulations regarding informed consent in healthcare. The preamble aims to promote ethical research practices, protect patient autonomy, and foster transparent and trustful relationships between doctors and their patients. I can tell you that because of the original Right to Try's adherence to these very important principles, that law is working today and is very successful. The Right to Try for Individualized Treatment Acts allows patients who have been diagnosed with a life-threatening or severely debilitating illness, who have considered approved treatment options, and who have a recommendation for an investigative individualized treatment from their physician, and who have also provided written informed consent regarding the risks associated with taking this investigational treatment. They qualify under this law. The treatments available under this law are not specified in the law. Rather, they have to be investigational and must be individualized to the specific patient. They must be based on analysis of the patient's genomic sequence, human chromosomes, gene products, enzymes, et cetera. And there are multiple layers of protection for patients under this law. As I mentioned, the facility has to be operating under a federal-wide assurance, which is regulated by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. These regulations have been in place for decades and are effective and working. And I would also like to point out that no one is compelled to participate. A physician is not required to provide a recommendation. A manufacturer or researcher is not required to create a treatment. The patient is not required to participate. And the institutional review board of the facility that holds a current federal-wide assurance has complete authority to not only reject a proposed treatment, but they also are required to monitor it and can halt it if needed. And that's at their discretion. No one is compelled to pay for these treatments. We know under the original right to try law that private payers as well as government payers have indeed paid for right to try treatments, but that's not a requirement. That is done at the discretion, and it's done on a case-by-case basis. And I'd also like to point out that we do have some liability protections in this law, as we did in the original right to try law, which requires compliance with the law as well as good faith. And there is nothing in this that would undermine the state medical board or stop negligent or bad faith behavior. As state lawmakers, you have the authority and the responsibility to provide additional avenues for treatment. There are no moonshots for rare and ultra-rare diseases. You can provide that for patients. Thank you, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any other presenters, or we're ready for questions? Oh, okay.
Chair Doñate, members of the committee, James Orenshall, State Senate District 21. Thank you very much. Sorry I'm running late from the other committee. I just wanted to speak in support of the legislation. In 2015, when right to try was considered by this legislature, I was looking back at the minutes. It had bipartisan co-sponsors, and it passed nearly unanimously in both houses. I think that it has helped our constituents since it passed, and I think that Assemblywoman Kasama's bill, if it passes, will have the ability to help other constituents. Just a few days ago, I heard a story on NPR about a disease, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And there's a type of new drug with gene therapy that is proven very promising and can be very effective. And there was a vote, I think 8-6 just a few days ago, to recommend that the FDA approve it. But it's still not guaranteed that this will be approved. And I think that that's a good example of the kind of things that could help our constituents, where sometimes the FDA moves more slowly than we would hope, and that there could be treatments that can be very effective, very helpful to our constituents, life-saving in some cases, that I think bills like this will help our constituents have that opportunity. You know, very often we have constituents with serious illnesses who travel to centers of excellence in other parts of the country to get onto trials, and you know, it would be really great for them to be able to stay here and stay with our providers and hopefully get that same opportunity. So I'd ask the committee to consider this, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions. I support Assemblywoman Kasama on her effort.
Thank you, Senator. We stand ready for questions if there are any.
Thank you so much. Senator Zung, did you want to go first before I ask my questions?
If that's okay.
Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank you, Assemblywoman Kasama, Senator Orenshall, Senator Dondera Loop. This is a great bill that's going to provide hope, and I can assure you it's going to save some lives. I was, in my prior stint as a legislator in the state to the west of us, a co-author of basically the same bill. And I'm very proud. It took a couple attempts to get it through, but it was signed into law. And so I'm very excited that you're all here today to present that. So one question that I have is that many times when a drug is being investigated by the FDA, sometimes they find other uses for that drug that they didn't think were even thought of. I'll give you an example. When sulfa drugs were being investigated as sulfa drugs, they found out that they had a side effect of lowering blood sugar. So that brought out an entire new class of drugs called sulfonylureas, which are treating type 2 diabetes still today. So if, assuming this bill does become law, will this allow for the off-label use of drugs that are being investigated and drugs that are currently been approved by the FDA to be used as individualized treatment as a physician sees fit for that patient?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute for the record. Chairman Doñate, Senator Stone, thank you for your question.
Yeah.
So the off-label issue is a bit separate. That is both Arizona and Tennessee have passed legislation that allow for the truthful sharing of scientific information with payers and patients and insurers. This I can tell you that off-label use has been used in right-to-try cases. ERC, which is a company that has developed a treatment for glioblastoma, which has been, the right-to-try program was actually seemed more efficacious in terms of lifespan of those patients over the regular phase 2 trial, and that treatment is actually under consideration by the European Medicines Agency at the moment. The Right to Try program, which included an off-label use of a drug, was included in the cocktail for those glioblastoma patients, and the outcomes were actually much stronger. Now, in terms of this particular bill, this does not specifically address off-label use, but if the provisions of this bill are met in terms of the creation of the individualized treatment, and there were, for example, a cocktail added to this treatment, yes, that would be allowed, just like it is allowed under the current right to try federal law.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. And I think with the gene therapy that's been mentioned and looking at somebody's genome and gene replacements, I mean, the technology is going to take us to places that are going to cure a lot of diseases that many of us are very concerned about. I hope in my lifetime, but for sure, I think in my kids' lifetime or my grandkids' lifetime. So I'm very excited about this bill. I applaud you for bringing it forward. And if it's possible to be added as a sponsor, I'd love to be added as well. Thank you.
I would be honored to have you added as well, and perhaps the staff could note that Lisa Krasner also asked to be added, so if we could add both of you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Senator Stone, do you have any other questions? No, sir. Okay. So I do have a few questions, and I did want to just make sure. I think the amendment, it was part of my recommendation. It's not a full amendment to the bill because I think there might be some amendments that come during the hearing before I ask my questions. So I have some semantics questions and then perhaps just more policy-oriented questions. So semantics-wise, in terms of the bill language, so the first thing that caught my eye was, Assemblywoman, I don't know if you can answer, your co-presenters. So in Section 2 of the bill, it establishes the provisions that a manufacturer of an investigational drug, or biological product, or device may make available, and then it strikes out terminal and life-threatening or severely debilitating disease. So just first question, what was the rationale for changing it from terminal to life-threatening or severely debilitating?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute for the record. Thank you, Chairman Doñate, for your question. That was changed because the federal legislation used the term life-threatening in the federal right to try law, and so this is consistent with that law.
Okay, thank you so much. So I guess the question that I come with is, so in part of the research that I looked at, right, there was this discussion, there's this debate nationally as to, do we look at folks that have terminal diseases, which is we've diagnosed them and we've said you have so much time of length to live. Then we have the folks who are life-threatening, so this disease could save your life based on the encounter that you're in. And then we have this section of debilitating disease. And I think most of the debate is probably in the debilitating part, because I think to some concern, the question is how much is too much, right? So I guess, easy question, is diabetes considered life debilitating?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute for the record. Thank you, Chairman Doñate, for your question. So the term terminal is typically a term used in insurance, and it's more so in the insurance realm. It is used, of course, medically, but usually in it's used for insurance purposes. Life-threatening is more expansive and includes diseases, for example, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So it is a broader term than just 6 months left to live. And the term severely debilitating is something that's irreversible. And this is also applies to a lot of illnesses where there is no chance of restoring, for example, motor function, intellectual function, and in some cases, loss of limbs, things of that nature. And so the severely debilitating is a term that is in federal law. It's also commonly used in the medical literature and in the medical community. And this law does give physicians, as well as the institutional review boards that are in the facilities with the federal-wide assurance, latitude for determining what is in fact severely debilitating. This is not something, in my view, that should be left to me. I'm not a medical professional, nor to lawmakers who aren't either, but really to those patients who are facing these very grave illnesses and the institutional review boards that would have to approve the treatment, and the physician and would be overseeing and confirming the physician's attestation that the patient is in fact facing a severely debilitating or life-threatening illness.
Okay, so just to clarify, so this is part of the argument that's happening nationally, right? Which is, to what extent is debilitating? So diabetes, in your definition under this bill, could be considered severely debilitating, correct?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute, for the record. Thank you, Chairman Doñate, for your question. I don't believe that there is a lot of controversy or discussion nationally on these definitions. The question of whether or not a patient is facing a severely debilitating illness there isn't a list of severely debilitating illnesses, but in fact there are patients that are facing severely debilitating illnesses that in fact have certain symptoms that are not reversible. So for example, a patient who was diagnosed with borderline diabetes would not be eligible for the right to try for individualized treatments, for example. Once again, I am not a physician. I don't have any medical background or training, but we crafted this law very specifically so that people that do would ultimately be making those decisions.
Okay. What about something like chronic pain? Would that be considered severely debilitating?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute, for the record. Thank you for your question, Senator Doñate. It is my understanding, and once again, I am not a medical professional, that generally speaking, chronic pain is not viewed as a severely debilitating illness universally. However, if there is a physician treating their individual patient that were to attest to that, they would be able to go to a facility or researcher or company that's working with an active federal-wide assurance in a facility to seek that treatment. So once again, this decision is not left in the hands of any of us. It is left in the hands of the medical providers that are caring for their patient, as well as the institutional review boards that are operating within these facilities that are under active federal-wide assurance.
Thank you. Just writing down a few notes. So in part of the rationale for my line of questioning is, I think what I've made clear is, so I work in the healthcare setting, as many of our committee members do, and so we always think about the unintended consequences that we could have with policies. And so we find ourselves in this weird position where we want to make sure patients have access to it, but then there could be market unintended consequences, there could be bad actors, and so we want to make sure that consumer protections are in place, et cetera, which is why I'm asking. So in some of the articles that have come out specifically on these right to try laws nationally, there's a consideration that so this is a quote from a assistant professor of medical ethics, Dr. Dickinson, and they pretty much mentioned that on its face, it seems as though the right to try would streamline the process and make it easier for patients. But actually, the FDA approves almost all requests for investigational treatments received through its longstanding expanded access pathway. So can you defend that? Has that conversation come up nationally, and what would be your response?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute for the record. Thank you for your question, Chair Donyate. So we did hear those arguments before right to try became federal law. I would like to point out that there was enormous time and effort and stakeholder processes that went into developing the rules and regulations around the federal right to try law. And it was done very thoughtfully, very carefully. And since right to try has become federal law and it has become more common and it is being used and it is successful, we are not seeing those concerns any longer. That was several years ago. And I will say that, of course, we want to make sure that patients are protected. That's why in this law, we have several layers of protection for patients. We want to ensure that the right patient gets the right treatment at the right time. What we know is happening right now is that a lot of patients in the U.S. don't have options here stateside. Instead, they are going overseas, and sometimes for very effective treatments, by the way. Sometimes they are going to Tijuana, which is very unfortunate because we don't believe that there is the same level of care given to patients there, and same with Mexico. So when we take a look at the FDA process, this particular individualized treatments are really, for the most part, outside of the scope for rare disease and ultra-rare disease patients. There is not an effective, timely process under the FDA, and that's part of the reason why we use the Department of Health and Human Service protections of human research subjects. We use the federal right assurance because we think that is a superior way to protect patients and also get them the treatment in a timely manner. So when we're talking about these treatments for rare and ultra-rare diseases, there is no clinical trial. There is not going to be, in many cases, a commercialized product. There aren't enough people for a trial. We're talking about a lot of cases where there isn't commercial interest. And it's not that the researchers and scientists don't care about the patients, it's that it's not feasible. And so we are establishing a new pathway that is separate from the FDA, for the FDA, it doesn't even apply because there are no clinical trials there for these diseases. So, I mentioned that there are, we hear a lot about moonshots and we hear a lot about warp speed. For these rare and ultra-rare disease patients, about 30 million, that doesn't exist. This is your opportunity to create that moonshot for these patients. The Riley family in Phoenix, Arizona was the inspiration for this particular bill. The Rileys have 3 daughters. Their second daughter, when she was a toddler, started regressing both physically and mentally. It took them a long time to get the clinical diagnosis for her. She has something called metachromatic leukodystrophy, MLD for short. There was a promising treatment in Italy that was a gene therapy. It was not available here in the U.S. And one of the state senators called me to find out if right to try was an option. It was not, like I mentioned, there were no clinical trials for this. There was no research being done in the United States. Italy was the only place. So in the height of the pandemic, since it's genetic, they had their youngest, their newborn baby tested. She was positive for this disease as well. The gene therapy in Italy is only effective before symptoms appear. In a matter of a couple of months, they had to raise several $100,000 in the height of the pandemic. They relocated to Italy for several months. Their baby daughter got the treatment, and very fortunately, she just turned 3 in January. But very sadly, Olivia, the sister who was initially diagnosed, who was already showing symptoms, she's now in hospice care. That is why this bill is a moonshot for these patients.
Thank you so much. So the next question that I have, which is perhaps I'll let you answer it and then we can have legal answer it as well. I actually had the chance to review a few of the documents that the Goldwater Institute had distributed and some of the reports that you have released within recent times. And one of them actually stated that, and quote, the FDA often stands in between patients and their treatments. And that in some cases that what we see is they stand in the way for the alleviation of symptoms or provide a potential cure for patients. in the arguments that we have against the policy reports that you guys have released, the logic that you have conflates the length of time it takes to bring a drug to the market with the length of time it takes to get access to the drug via the expanded access program. And what we have seen nationally is the debate against it is you can already receive it within perhaps 30 days if need be. And so I guess the question that I probably come to is we have to find this balance where if patients need it in a short time span, right, whether they're in life-threatening or terminal illnesses, they should have access to informed consent. They should have the ability to comprehend what's in front of them. But then the bigger liability question is, so we now pass this bill and we are giving patients these medications down the line. If the FDA comes in and they say, whoa, like this medication, like you need to stop, like this is, we need to take over because federally we have these provisions in place and we believe you're going to be doing more harm to these patients by continuing such program. If we pass this law, does that prevent the federal government or FDA from being able to step in? And so I want to ask that question, perhaps if you can help us as to how states are reacting, and then I'll have our legal counsel respond as well.
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute, for the record. Thank you, Chairman Doñate, for your question. So I'll start by just explaining very briefly that the Food and Drug Administration does have an expanded access program as well as compassionate use program. We do know that that the time required for getting the application to the FDA, which is when their clock starts, is significant. And we also know that there are cases where the FDA will try to override the medical recommendation on dosage. For example, they have also rejected in the case of Dr. Ibrahim Delpassand in Texas. They have rejected his expanded access program before it was federal law, while it was still state law, and on the basis that they didn't need any more data. These were patients that were facing neuroendocrine cancer. He had a treatment that was waiting for the final FDA green light, and there were patients traveling to Germany to get the treatment. One patient was a veteran who mortgaged his house in order to save his life. So we have a lot of the FDA statistics are based on when they start their clock and cases where they ask that the application be rescinded. So I would question that level. And I will say that I think that the Right to Try movement has, in fact, created some improvements in their process. And I'm very happy to say that, we do think that it has sped up and that there have been some positive reforms in that area. So getting to this issue of the FDA in this particular area, when it comes to individualized treatments, we're not actually talking about a treatment where there is something that the FDA is evaluating. For example, there was a case of a young woman named J.C. Hermstad. She had lost her identical twin sister, whose name was Alex. She was 17 when she passed away to childhood ALS. And so at that point, J.C. was facing her own fight against this cruel and debilitating disease. The doctors and medical researchers that were caring for her created an individualized treatment just for her. But they were in a race against time because her disease was causing her to regress physically and mentally. And the FDA process was taking a very long time, though. She was losing her mobility, her breathing was being affected, and as you know, in this illness, a lot of times those patients end up relying on manual means to breathe, and her time was running out. That's when very conservative Congressman Angus King of Iowa, who was her representative, and then Democrat Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, teamed up to run a private bill in order to grant JC the permission to move forward and access that treatment. Fortunately, before the bill actually passed, the FDA relented and granted JC that access. It might seem like a very rare political alliance, these two lawmakers working together across the political aisle, but it really isn't all that surprising when you consider that they were serving patients who were under their own qualified doctor's care. It was just good policy. So very sadly, JC's doctors were seeing improvement once she got access, but by the time she got that access from the FDA, her disease had progressed too far, and she passed away in 2020. Today, that same treatment that was originally given to JC, pioneered by her own crusade, is now in phase 3 clinical trials. The right to try for individualized treatments would allow families like JC's who are following in her footsteps and countless other rare disease families who never had that access to have a safe, expedited pathway that you can create, that you can allow here in your state, where patients no longer have to first beg the federal government for permission to seek that treatment.
Chair Dunyate, James Orenshaw, State Senate District 21. Thank you very much for hearing this bill, and I appreciate you allowing me to join in support. I have a bill over in Assembly Legislative Operations and Elections that I'm going to be presenting shortly, so I wonder if I could be excused. Thank you very much. Thank you, committee.
I'll go ahead and allow our legal counsel to reply on the FDA procedure versus in case of liability, et cetera. So,
Eric Robbins, LCB Legal, for the record. So, I'm not sure how much I have to add here, but just a couple of things. So, it's important to recognize that state law cannot trump federal law. So, if there were something done under this bill, it wouldn't prohibit the federal government from coming in if it violated federal law and enforcing that federal law. But by the same token, the state cannot, or the federal government cannot force the state to enforce federal law. And then another thing that bears mentioning is that there is a federal right to try law. It looks like it's not, maybe not quite as broad as what we have here in front of us, but if what was done was within the scope of the federal right to try law, then there wouldn't be any FDA enforcement because it would be legal under, clearly legal under federal law.
thank you so much. Solomon, did you want to reply, or are you just moving the water? Okay. Further question. So, did you have, Senator, did you have a question? Oh, okay. So here's my rationale as to why I'm asking these questions. So I have a fear, as I mentioned earlier, that there could be certain bad actors that exist, or the unintended consequences of a market that potentially could exist by enabling this type of legislation. What are in the bill right now, are there any provisions to monitor, outside of what the IRB would do for a particular institution, would the state have some level of oversight in terms of tracking if patients receive these drugs, and perhaps some level of surveillance that could exist, a reporting mechanism? Does that exist in the bill right now? I didn't capture it, so I just wanted to make sure, like, does that exist? Have other states enacted something similar to where we actually track who are the patients that are receiving this outside of just the standard institutions, IRB?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute, for the record. Thank you, Chairman Donyate, for your question. So I would like to say that your fear of bad actors is completely legitimate, and that is why we took such great care and many steps and engaged in such a long stakeholder process in order to ensure that there were multiple layers of patient protections. I will point out that under this particular law, we are using regulations from the Department of Health and Human Services Federal-Wide Assurance. The way that the protection for human subjects in research works is that they can fall under the Food and Drug Administration, they can fall under HHS, or they can be exempt entirely. We decided to use HHS regulations for a variety of reasons. I am not an attorney, and so I cannot speak to all of the details as an authoritative attorney on this, but I can tell you that federal law provides a floor for individual protections. State laws can and do go above and beyond federal constitutional protections. It is the right to try to save one's own life, individual liberty and autonomy, medical autonomy, that we are using in order to, in conjunction with state legislation, the state constitutional protections, in order to advance this law. We know that from the Texas right to try law, when Dr. Ibrahim Dalbasan treated almost 180 patients under the Texas law, that there was a possibility that the Food and Drug Administration might react, given that he had a treatment that was under clinical investigation by the FDA. In fact, he was waiting for the final FDA green light. The FDA did not. And it is our contention that not only does the FDA not have jurisdiction over what is deemed to be an individualized treatment under legislation passed by a state using that legislation, their law, as well as state constitutional protections, that is in fact legal. Now, these are very arcane and very detailed items. In terms of how these bills are drafted, they're very concise, very specific, and do rely heavily on prior court precedents. I will tell you too
But Ms. Lopez, my question is, are there any requirement so the reason why I asked that question was as part of again, I'm referencing the arguments that have been made nationally, which is not only have states passed this law, but the difficulty is there's no tracking mechanism to see who are these patients, how many of them have been going through this investigational drug treatment program. And so I don't see it in the bill. So I'm asking, are there any reporting mechanisms that you have considered specifically statewide where if an institution prescribes this medication for a certain patient, that those names and the drugs that they have been prescribed to and the time length, et cetera, is referred back to, say, the Board of Medical Examiners or the Board of Osteopathic Medicine? That's what I'm asking specifically for this state, because I don't see that anywhere in this provision. So I'm asking what those conversations have been.
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute, for the record. Thank you, Chairman Donyate, for your question. So in this, there are no requirements that treatments be reported to the state. There are a lot of requirements that the Institutional Review Board continuously and closely monitor treatments. Throughout the entire process, the Institutional Review Board does have the power and authority and a requirement to end a treatment should they be concerned about that treatment. And there is nothing required for the Institutional Review Board to approve it in the first place. Now, in terms of your question of bad actors, I think it's really important to point out that the reason that we use a federal-wide assurance is because there aren't ways of getting out of the federal-wide assurance in the way that there are some in terms of getting out of some of the human protections for research under the FDA. And those are kind of more arcane laws and rules and regulations. But basically, we know that this approach, these multiple layers of protection, have been quite effective over decades. And these are more stringent and more carefully crafted than anything else that's available.
Thank you. I'll let Senator Stone ask his questions as well. And we did have a few colleagues also join. I think my grave concern, so I understand that there are provisions in place where perhaps the federal government does not respond as fast as we need for certain patients, especially when they have a debilitating disease. And I think that is an avenue that we can definitely explore. Having said that, again, there has to be, at least in my respect, I have grave concern with a bill that does not have requirements for reporting mechanisms back to the state so that we can surveil and monitor as to how these programs and initiatives are. If we are going to remove requirements that the FDA had overseen before, I believe there should be an infrastructure in place statewide to monitor it. I don't trust the IRB process or the informed consent process because you take that into consideration that the patient understands what they're getting delivered. When you're in that scenario, if you have a debilitating disease, which is what I was trying to get clarified, right? Of course, you're going to take the medication if it's one thing that change your trajectory for how your illness is. And so there are questions that come ethically as to what occurs if you are in that scenario. And part of my recommendation on the amendment was, let's preserve the informed consent. Let's make sure that patients understand the rights that they have, that they are able to comprehend it if they speak a different language, and that they are given an inherent right, because now we're removing the FDA authorization, that if they are participating in this program and they choose to go through, they understand the full risks that are perhaps in the treatment program that they're about to subscribe to, that they understand here are the scenarios that could occur from what we know with pure knowledge from other patients. Here's the scenario that if you have these symptoms from taking this medication, if you feel your heart racing, etc., here's the person to call. You can call your physician, you can call this 24/7 hotline, and that you develop some level of trust or at least consumer protection for these patients, so that they don't fall into the respect. And I think it's important also for the Board of Medical Examiners to have some level of authority as to how this is being regulated, because it's one trade-off or the other. So if the response is we're not getting it quick enough, then we have to find some infrastructure to at least develop it properly in this state. And that's just my personal perspective. But Senator Stone, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think you bring up some very valid points. Just to let people know that the FDA process is just for a new drug application, we're talking probably a year or two just to get the application in, and then we're talking about years of studies where they have to provide efficacy and safety. Safety is usually the first thing that they're studying for. So usually when somebody is coming for an investigational drug, usually it's gone through the process somewhat. And I would imagine that if somebody qualifies for a investigational drug, of course they're going to be following the advice of a physician that has studied the pharmacology of the drug and has consulted with the drug company that is codifying what the doctor wants to use it for. And I would assume that the patients, as they use the drug and have good reactions or bad reactions, I assume that there's some reporting back to the drug company as to what the experience of the patient was. Is that correct?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute, for the record. So Chairman Doñate, Senator Stone, I would like to just clarify that for individualized treatments of this kind, these aren't falling under the purview of the FDA. These are not in clinical trial. They are not in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 for the most part. We're talking about treatments where there is not a clinical trial, where it's likely that there will not be a clinical trial. There are either not enough patients, it's probably not going to be commercialized. When we're talking about the FDA process, we're talking about a process that was created many decades ago that were really intended to create treatments for large populations. We are now in a different era of medicine. We're not using 1950s medication, but we're still using a regulatory process based on 1950s medicine. So when we're talking about the right to try for individualized treatments, we're talking about a treatment bespoke for that individual patient based on, for example, their own genetic material for them, made specifically for them. There is not a process for that. And in fact, several weeks ago, a senior FDA official admitted during a national conference that there were a lot of new drug applications that only had minor administrative problems with them, but they didn't have the capacity to get them cleared because they didn't have capacity for more Zoom meetings. This is an issue where the medicine is not only moving much faster than the regulatory process, but we do have ways of protecting patients. And as I mentioned, we've got a couple of different ways that are possible to do it. We've got the Food and Drug Administration approach, and we also have the Department of Health and Human Services, which has a very robust and very stringent regulatory process that governs the protection of human subjects in research. We are using the federal law that HHS has, the federal wide assurance, in order to protect patients. There are many cases where treatments on human subjects don't fall under either. We don't want to be under that. We want to be where the strongest protections would apply, and that's exactly how we created this bill.
Okay, then just lastly, let's talk about the disclosures. Obviously, a patient is going to be disclosed that they're taking a non-FDA approved approach. There are risks associated with it. Those risks have to be spelled out. The physician is going to be held harmless if anything happens to that patient. The drug company, they're going to be held harmless. So I don't see any lack of documentation that gives a patient the full story about the treatment and the risk of them taking it. But when you've been told that you have a terminal illness and you've used all conventional therapies that are out there, then when time is not on your side, then to me, it's worth taking the risk of a life-saving idea that a physician has that can save your life. And while I don't have a problem if that gets reported back to the state, the patient's family and the patient don't care about the reporting to the state. They care about getting access to that drug that might be the silver bullet to save their life. And that's why I think this bill is one to support. So thank you for your answers, and I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for being late here today. It's a busy time, and I actually had a bill hearing, so this is good news, and so I appreciate you being here today. And from what I'm hearing from the questions, I think there's a misconception about what this is. And again, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, please, that we're not doing, in my day, when Senator Stone was in pharmaceutical school and I was in medical school, we had evidence of clinical trials on 10,000 different nurses, and they took the birth control pill and they ended up with breast cancer, but it took 10,000 patients to do that. This is not that at all, and we have to change our hats and our mindset when we think about individual treatments, because there won't be a study of 10 people, there won't be 100 people, there won't be those people to report, because everybody's genetics are unique. And so when you do biological markers, you have a treatment plan for only one person. So although I share Senator Donate's concern that there has to be some accountability, there will never be, well, you treated 10 patients with X drug and you had 9 people improve, 1 person didn't. That's just not how this works. And so I think that if I'm hearing this correctly, my understanding of the uniqueness of this is this is really us going forward with the science that we have to treat everybody with their own unique genetics on the disease process that they have. Because one thing I've learned in the many years that I've practiced, many more than 40 years, every person responds differently to a medication that may have had 10,000 people trial. And some of them work, some they won't. And why? It's because of their genetics. So thank you for saying, hey, let's start looking at the genetics of somebody and make that treatment plan personal to those. So somehow, though, having said all of that, and I'm very supportive of this concept because I think it's something we have to do, we must do this, the accountability of saying, what you do as a company or with these products, there is some consistency on how you make those diagnoses, though, right? And so you might have 100 patients come to you and you formulate a plan for those. Some accountability on, if nobody improves, then clearly something's going on there. Or if suddenly everybody dies within a week of seeing you, there is an issue there. I mean, one thing I do know that people who are desperate will do anything to improve. And so I think what Senator Donate was, the quackery out there, the people online, they're saying, hey, I will save you. And so I think wanting some reassurance that patients, that informed consent model, truly understanding this is unique to them. So I think, so please correct me if I don't have that right, that again, it will be a N number of 1 because they're unique to that, but somewhere along the way, the patient protection where you have, signed documents that they understand this is a patient of 1. There's no other model to use. And that results, though, driven and how successful is the entire concept. And so and I apologize if you clearly said how you're going to report to that, and the accountability piece of how successful you are. Anecdotal patient testimonies, really, you have that's subjective sometimes. And so I'm just wondering, where's that accountability piece?
Naomi Lopez, Goldwater Institute for the record. Chairman Doñate, Senator Titus, thank you for your questions. So thank you for bringing up the fact that we are in a new era of medicine. Innovation is happening extremely rapidly. And in fact, the United States is losing ground to countries like Germany and Japan, where in Germany, for example, peptide vaccines are now normal. We've got, in Japan, regenerative treatments get provisional approval after phase 1 for 7 years. We are seeing United States patients not have access to these treatments. And unfortunately, that puts them, I think, in a very vulnerable position when they go to Tijuana for gene therapy, when they go to Mexico for their child's brain cancer treatment. I mean, there is, I think, a need to recognize that if you don't create safe, protected pathways for patients, that you're actually putting them at even more risk. They are under your authority, under your state law, when you pass these types of bills. Now, this issue of tracking treatments and outcomes is one that is, I think, important to point out that under the original right to try law, we had a lot of discussions about this. These are not trials. These are individualized. So under the original right to try law, the federal law does in fact require reporting. It was very much delayed. It was due 1 year after signing. So it was due, the rules for reporting were due in May of 2019, which was a year after the bill was signed into federal law, but we didn't see them until this past fall. So right to try has been happening for years without the reporting requirements. But under the final reporting rules, there is no outcomes data required. And that's because these are not trials. These are treatments for patients that don't meet the inclusion criteria, for example, for a trial. Maybe they're too sick to participate in a trial. These are patients where the value of the clinical data is not the same as an actual trial. So that's why under the federal law and the final rule that was promulgated this past fall, there are no outcomes requirements for this. Now, under the Right to Try for Individualized Treatment Act that's under consideration here in your state, we also use that same approach because the Institutional Review Board has the responsibility and the obligation to closely monitor these treatments, that it's being carried out in the manner that it's supposed to, and they also have the authority to shut it down. And so we're talking about, I think we're talking about a very small number of treatments overall. The value of data from multiple sites, for example, is probably going to be zero when you consider that these are individualized treatments. You're probably talking about different diseases. When you talk about an individual treatment, you might have, for example, 300 mutations for a rare cancer. And then once you get the genetic information, it might be 300 to the 300th power in terms of what that genetic information is. So that's part of the reason why we did not include that. The federal wide assurance rules have been in place for decades. They've worked incredibly well. And we have, I think, rightfully so, a lot of trust in something that has been around that long, that has been working for that long. And we, under the federal wide assurance rules, and their, Health and Human Services creates these, the informed consent requirements are very strict. The Institutional Review Board reviews them. The informed consent has to be done in the language that the patient understands or their agent. And we know that the right to try was able to turn into federal law because of the strict protections we had in the original law. It wouldn't have happened. We know that the right to try for individualized treatments is only going to be successful with strict protocols, with informed consent, with making sure that that the patient, that they know what the risks are, what the possible positive outcomes as well as the negative ones. We went to great lengths to ensure that we want this law to be successful. We want patients to be protected. We want this to ultimately be the law of the land. And that is why I feel very confident that we have very strong protections in this bill, and I wouldn't want it any other way, quite frankly.
So go ahead.
Can I just, I'd like to, Heidi Kasama, Assemblywoman Heidi Kasama for the record, to answer your question under Section 4 on page 8. We had, in 2015 when this was passed, there's a whole section there on informed consent. And so if you look at that, under that section there, This just adds the current treatment for individualized, but it has a whole section on informed consent. And if you look at it, for example, if we look at section 2 and A, B, C, and you can see as you go on D, it's very specific about what could be the outcomes if there's a change in your treatment or your health. There's a whole section here that talks about informed consent, that they must have that, and that was already established in the 2015 law when we passed it.
Great, thank you, and thanks for the explanation. And one other question, if I might, Mr. Chair, and I apologize again if this was addressed and I wasn't here. So I have been on the State Board of Medical Examiners in the past, part of an investigative team. I'm still the county health officer for our county, so public health is an issue. And there was an event while I was on the board in Clark County where there was a physician that was, gastroenterologist, very different, doing simple colonoscopies, nothing much, but just to use the IV setups that they were using wasn't following proper protocol, and a number of patients got hepatitis. So because they're regulated on a process, we were able to investigate that, identify those patients, and understand how many were exposed and that. So again, I just want to make sure that since you're going to be, whatever the mechanism is, whether it's a pill or an IV or whatever treatment that it is set for these patients, whether it's a capsule or infusion or whatever, there can be adverse outcomes from this, notwithstanding that the original disease process itself. So I just want to make sure that there is adequate monitoring of these establishments to make sure that if there is a outbreak of whatever because you happen to get if you sedate them or however the process is, and it will be unique, that we have an ability of making sure that we're protecting the patients. And so that's where my questioning are coming. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator Titus. Yeah, I mean, so as part of, unless we have any other further questions, I'll just close this out so that we can go to testimony. I think part of the request for a potential amendment, since I know the deadline's coming, things that could be looked at. So in terms of so we touched point on a lot of the concerns that have been held nationally. We talked about limited patient understanding as to what informed consent looks like. I think the easiest way to repair that would be perhaps in the bill insert that there is a standard preamble, right, of informed consent, but that it has to be simplified in a one-pager document that could be translated in any language, and that it's not just appropriately in a language that they understand, but it's at the appropriate reading level, because health literacy matters, and you need to, for me, the word comprehension, I could understand that word, but if I didn't graduate from high school or say I didn't even finish middle school like my father, that's a very different circumstance, especially when you're translating languages. So appropriate reading level for the patient in different reading levels. 8th grade is what we use in public health. And then also making sure that it's appropriate language just for the informed consent part. With regards to the reporting mechanisms, I do believe that the bill needs some provisions for accountability and tracking, at least to the Board of Medical Examiners or the State Board of Osteopathic Medicine, minimum. I think it should at least require them to establish some level of regulations as to how these drugs will be rolled out. My preference, and perhaps this is something that you can talk offline with the committee members, is to switch back to terminal and if you give me 1 second, I can pull it back up. Life-threatening. So terminally and life-threatening, see how that goes. And if we need to come back and expand it, then we can consider that. And then obviously the biggest one, which is there are a lot of questions that other states have raised that have passed this legislation as to, again, talking about the consequences that could happen. If we pass the bill as is, I have a fear, and this is just me speaking now, I have a fear that this lowers the trust that we have in the FDA approval process. We have that approval process for a reason, but I understand the individualized aspect, right? Especially as mRNA technology comes out and these drugs could be potentially saving to implement technologies. But there's also a question which I don't think was raised today, which is if you develop some outcome, say you go to the hospital because you took this medication that you believe was going to save your life, and now you're at a worse outcome than you were before, how does that interact with your insurance, et cetera? And I think in hindsight, there are a lot of factors that exist in healthcare, factors that we believe that I have introduced in other bills, specifically Senate Bill 203, where there are motivations that exist in healthcare that could be the bad actors that were mentioned, and there's no provisions in place right now to protect it. Quite frankly, I think the easiest way to do it would be to limit this bill only to research facilities in the state, change it back to terminal and, as I mentioned, for life-threatening, see how that goes, institute the provisions that I put for informed consent, and the reporting mechanisms to the appropriate governing body, and that they can establish regulations, see how that goes, gain back the patient stories of the lives that were saved, of the technologies that were implemented, and then go from there. I think that's probably the easiest aspect if you want to proceed through this legislation, because I see both sides, but I also see the unintended consequences, and I want to make sure that consumers are protected. So that would be my recommendation if the bill gets a work session. So we look forward to, if you can share that when you guys are ready, back to the committee members, and then we'll go to testimony, if that's good. All right. Let's go ahead and open it up for testimony. So if you would like to support this bill, we ask folks to please come forward. And we'll start here in Carson City, so please begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and a member of the committee. My name is Hideto Peter Kasama. Do I have to spell that? Hideto. And you want me to spell Peter? And Kasama is my last name, Kasama. And I'm here to testify in support of this bill based on my own experience. About a year ago, I was diagnosed as stage 4 stomach cancer, 6/8. The tumor was almost like an inch thick. And the first oncologist was from the old school of thoughts. I think he was not too open to new methods, new treatment technologies. We felt that, and some of the mistakes that he made, we just immediately said, this is not the place to be. So we searched for a new oncologist. My wife worked very hard to find one, and I'm glad we did that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today to make this testimony. The Dr. Parikh at the Comprehensive Cancer Center, first thing he said to me in his office was, Peter, we are going to incorporate immunotherapy along with the chemotherapy. And the first 2 or 3 chemo treatment session was so hard on me. I couldn't do anything for almost like a week after that treatment. And then the side effect, lost all the appetite. I lost 35 pounds. I'm not that much of a bigger guy, and 35 pounds off my body is very, very serious. But then he told me to see a surgeon to remove the tumor surgically. And I went to her office, and she came into the office and opened up the file and said, Mr. Kasama, we don't need to do the surgery. Your tumor is spread into liver, and lymph node is getting darker, and there's a clear indication your tumor is spreading out of the stomach. So then I said, what can I do? And she said, basically what she told me was kancho days, make an arrangement at hospice. So that means what? I mean, I'm gonna be gone in a few months then. And that's pretty much what I was told. That's the verdict that I received. I was desperate at that point. What can I do? I start drafting final letter from the heaven to my wife. The mentality, support and data and monitoring is out the door to me. I mean, I want to survive. I need something that's going to give me a hope. And that's the mentality this young lady had almost 10 years ago. And this professor at the Duke University and Brain Tumor Center has been testing to inject polio viruses into the cancer patient. And it's showing a very strong results. So this young lady who had the brain tumor, then the first chemo treatment worked really well. Then she was cancer free or remission. But then a year later, when she was 21, it came back with a vengeance. She was almost dying. My mentality the same. No option. I mean, you grab anything you can't survive. So she went to see this doctor at the Duke University, a brain tumor center. They injected the polio viruses, half tablespoon full of polio viruses. It took 6.5 hours to inject into her brain, and it worked. She's totally cancer-free. And monitoring this level of a seriously desperate situation, your options are limited. You have, not limited, you don't have any options. I mean, you'll be passed in a few months. You're gonna be gone. And when the doctor comes and tell you, this is what we're gonna do I have a technical know-how or the time to verify the methods being tested and proved, efficacy is, proved, or it's in the process of FDA investigation? I don't really care. I just wanted to try it and see what happens. I think that's what this bill is all about, I think. So that based on this successful application of the polio virus into the tumor, FDA gave them breakthrough designation the following year, so that they are able to treat the patients on commercial basis without the FDA certification. And this is what this bill is all about, I think. I just want telling you out of my own heart, that's the way I felt. I have nothing, no option. I just want to grab something to survive. The immunotherapy is the one that really turned the things around. And I would start eating, start gaining weight and energy a little bit, being able to fight off the cancers. And I understand that the theory this Duke University professor used is that cancer cells creates the film outside that your body immune system cannot penetrate, white cell cannot penetrate, but polio virus can. So they injected the polio, then your body thought that their body is attacked by a polio virus. So that your body mobilized the colony of white cells and went after the polio virus, and in the meantime, in that process, it killed the cancer tumors. And that's what the immunoassay is all about. Use your own immune system to fight against the cancer cells. And that's why I'm here today. So I'm in support of this bill.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kusama. We greatly appreciate your comments, and we're appreciative of your recovery, and very honored to have you here today to share your story.
Like my wife said, I had a hole-in-one in my golf game about 2 weeks ago.
You earned Thank you so much, sir, for joining. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Donate and members of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee.
Can you please turn on your mic, please? Let's start over.
Okay, sorry. Good afternoon, Chairman Donate and members of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Lisa Santwer, Santwer, and I am with Comprehensive Cancer Centers of Nevada. I'm here speaking on behalf of actually Dr. Rupesh Parikh, who is Peter's physician and also Helen's physician. We, at Comprehensive Cancer, we serve thousands of cancer patients in Las Vegas and the greater metro area. And I'll be speaking in support of AB 188, which would allow or expand individualized investigational treatment for a patient diagnosed with a life-threatening or severely debilitating disease. New advances in precision medicine are rapidly altering the way physicians diagnose and treat cancer. Availability of biomarker testing that factors in a patient's genomic and cellular profile means that truly customized treatments are closer than ever before. Based on a patient's genomic and cellular profile, physicians at Comprehensive now can determine that a treatment for a different cancer type could be effective in treating an entirely different cancer type, giving a stage 4 cancer patient more options to fight their disease and preserve their life. This is the case with Dr. Parikh's patient, Peter Kasama. I want to also speak directly about another patient of Dr. Parikh's, Helen O'Hanlon, who's here with me today to provide her own testimony. Helen is a stage 4 granulosa cell tumor cancer patient, and when Dr. Parikh first met her, she was out of options. Her type of cancer had only ever been treated by surgery. Based on Helen's tumor makeup, Dr. Parikh and another one of our fellow colleagues, Dr. Curtis, got together and recommended a treatment called CyberKnife. Even though this treatment had never been used before on her cancer type, they felt it could work for the 8 tumors debilitating her body. The problem at the time was that CyberKnife was not yet considered a proven treatment for Helen's type of cancer. After some convincing, Helen agreed to the CyberKnife procedure, and it has absolutely worked miracles. To date, Helen has had 3 CyberKnife procedures, which have eliminated the 8 existing tumors in her body. However, we just learned 2 weeks ago that we're going to need to use it on Helen again. Helen has had a dozen surgeries, with the last one before trying CyberKnife nearly killing her. We knew CyberKnife had been incredibly effective for a number of conditions locally and throughout the world, so the doctors thought, why not try to look at this through a new lens? In addition to CyberKnife, and since Helen had failed multiple chemotherapy treatments, they decided to use off-label letrozole to see if we could better control her disease.
If you can please wrap up your comments, please.
Yep, I'm almost done. The combination of CyberKnife and letrozole have worked to keep her disease contained. We've learned that from Helen that this can work for those with her genetic makeup. Helen is a great example of why it's so important for a patient to have the right to try when faced with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. We hope we all have a voice and we can generate many more success stories just like Helen's with the support of this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Donate and members of the Senate Health and Human Service Committee. My name is Helen O'Hanlon, and I'm a stage 4 cancer patient, and I support Bill 188. I've been fighting cancer for 15 years. The first 8 years in Chicago, I've had 7 recurrences of stage 4 granulosa cell tumor, a rare form of ovarian cancer. I've had 12 surgeries to remove them, 3 different chemotherapies, and handfuls of medications. I was told 7 years ago in Chicago there was no other treatment options. So I moved to Las Vegas, home, to be around family and friends for end of life, essentially to die. So I came back in 2017, established new care with Dr. Parikh in Comprehensive Cancer Center of Nevada. Dr. Parikh took over my care, and with his colleague, radiation oncologist Dan Curtis, they pioneered a treatment for my rare ovarian cancer called CyberKnife, a high-energy X-ray machine that delivered targeted radiation beams that destroys tumor cells. It was going to be pain-free and easy. I wanted to keep fighting, so I did it. Luckily for me, they were right. I still have cancer. As a stage 4 cancer patient, I'm monitored and tested, making sure we are always on top and ready to treat my cancer. Since coming to Comprehensive and Dr. Parikh and Dr. Curtis using CyberKnife, I've gone 5 years with no tumors. 2 weeks ago, we found out we had another tumor. But we are at a different time because CyberKnife is effective, it works, it's painless, and it's not technically approved for my type of cancer, but because I have Dr. Parikh, I have access. There are many people with my type of cancer throughout the country. They do not have access, and I'm watching them die. And it's sad. So I am grateful for my doctors at Comprehensive for thinking outside the box and pioneering this treatment that works for my rare cancer. I'm an example of why it's so important that we support AB 188, and hopefully this opens doors for many other cancer patients so that we have a fight in the game, so we can be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today and sharing your story. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman and members of the HHS Committee, my name is Annette Whittemore from Reno, Nevada, and I'm representing the WPI, a medical research institute dedicated to individuals impacted by infection-associated chronic diseases, including myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic tick-borne diseases, and post-acute SARS-CoV-2 or long COVID. I support AB 188 because it has the potential to improve and save lives by allowing individuals to access cutting-edge treatments that might otherwise be unavailable. I wonder if this law had been in place when my late mother-in-law suffered a major stroke days before a new therapy was FDA approved, if she would have lived. However, the doctor stated that the clot-busting drug was already on their shelves, but their hands were tied. She died 4 days later. And my comment to that is, how many people have died waiting? And are we trying to protect them to death? I think what we're talking about here is life-saving, life-altering treatments in a timely manner and giving a human being, each one of us, the right to make that choice. So I want you today to consider backing this bill that ensures that patients facing life-threatening or severely disabling diseases can broaden their access to innovative therapies after they've exhausted all other options. This bill presents a compassionate and responsible approach to addressing the urgent need of patients. Please support the passage of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else here in Carson City? Seeing none. Please begin when you're ready.
Yes, Senior Chair Devontae, this is an emotional topic for me. I just want to apologize for clapping earlier. And I'd just like to thank...
Name for the record, please.
Joshua Smith.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Senior Titus for bringing up the heart of this bill. My brother had acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and he went through 3 rounds of chemo without success, unfortunately. And his tumor had a specific genetic marker that would have allowed a specific therapy to be given to him, but unfortunately, it was not able to be given to him because of the laws. And he did not make it. And I was really frustrated with this whole thing, and you really brought up the point of the heart of this bill, is that the FDA has no capacity at all whatsoever to regulate or approve through any mechanism a targeted therapy for that individual person. And so a lot of the discussion that was on the floor today was just a little frustrating because of that, because it has nothing to do with the FDA. The FDA does not have the capacity to approve or regulate or do anything. And so that's why this bill is so important, and I really urge you to look at the heart of it and understand that it is for one person. It cannot go through a clinical trial. It cannot be approved for anything like that. And I just encourage everybody to look at it and deeply consider passing this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Anyone else here in Carson City? Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in support of AB 188, please press *9 to take your place in the queue.
Is it my turn to talk?
Please proceed.
Hello? Is it my turn to talk?
Please proceed.
And are you hearing me? My name is Janet Campbell. Are you hearing me?
Please proceed.
My name is Janet Campbell, CAMPBELL, from Las Vegas, Nevada. I am in support of SB 188. I have been to the Capitol building to hear some talk about this bill in March. I know it's been going on for a long, long time. Of all the conversation that I've heard today reiterates the fact that this is, all bills evidently are a long process, but I just want to say that if anything could be done for these number of rare cases, then I would say that's why I'm in favor of it, that it should be not what if somebody is not helped, but what if somebody is helped. And when the last hope of any living is the decision that a doctor makes or a decision that the government makes are quite different. And I think it's time to get the right verbiage if you have to have that, get on with the programs, and give these people some hope and some help. Unfortunately, it cannot help my friend who has been diagnosed with ALS just this year, but it took so long to diagnose her, and it was evidently very progressive. So she cannot be helped, but she was able to try a few things, or they were going to try a few things to see if they could make it work. And this is exactly the kind of bill that people like her need. And some of the care or medication she will get can help her end of life be more humane. Thank you very much.
Hello, this is PJ Belanger, BELANGER. Thank you again, Chair and Committee. I am a prime candidate for what's called ablation treatment. I have goiters on my thyroid that cause my deviated windpipe. So I have lots of choking episodes which are life-threatening. The disease itself is not fatal. However, the symptoms are life-threatening. And I've been treating and shrinking the goiters all naturally because the medical industry does not offer me anything here but being butchered. And I'm not willing to be butchered so that I can be a slave, or I should say prisoner, to the pharmaceutical industry for the rest of my life. I have done my research. I'm a nutritionist by trade, certified as a health educator, certified as a wellness educator, certified in kinesiology. I've been studying, practicing, and teaching natural healing since I was 16 years old, and that's 44 years now. So thank God I went that route to save myself, because I've overcome lupus in my 30s, and now I am beating Graves' disease and goiters as we speak. and I survived 2 heart attacks in 2019 as well. But the point being that if I could get the ablation treatment, I would be done with this years ago. I would be done. I wouldn't have these life-threatening choking episodes because I have a deviated windpipe due to the goiters pushing my windpipe over. And the ablation treatment is so successful in Italy and Sweden and Germany and all these other countries that people are getting reduction in goiter size for up to 5. Please let us have these trials. If you want to call them experimental, whatever you guys want to call them here in the U.S., whatever the FDA is doing to block these types of things in the U.S. needs to be alleviated for people like myself. So,
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your
also,
comments.
I'd like
If you can please wrap them up.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you. And I'm also saying thank you to Heidi Kasama on behalf of Americans for Prosperity for bringing this to the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much. BPS, is there anyone else?
One moment, Chair.
Hello, can you hear me?
Please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Donate and committee. For the record, Jason Greninger, Greninger. I just want to say I'm in support of AB 188. I have personal experience and empirical data with a person having a reversal of a mantle cell lymphoma, which is a non-Hodgkin's leukemia. It had metastasized to stomach, lungs, and neck, and she was sent to hospice, fairly elderly, and all of it was removed. Every bit of it was cured. Even removed from oxygen at one point, which, as a person that's worked in surgery for 33 years, including UMC trauma up until year 2000, and part of the kidney transplant team, I didn't think these things were possible myself. But it turns out there are possibilities with some medicine. This was a cannabis suppository treatment taken voluntarily at the time. But my point is these things need to be available to process and try and move forward so we can find the things that do work, even though there are a few charlatans in the world. So please support AB 188, and thank you very much.
Chair, there are no additional callers to provide testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to testimony in opposition to this bill. Is there anyone here or in Carson or in Las Vegas? Seeing none. BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in opposition to AB 188, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers to provide testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to neutral. If folks are neutral, if they can please make their way forward. We don't have anyone here or in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to testify in neutral for AB 188, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
If it could please the chair, this is Wiz Rizar, Deputy State Director with American for Prosperity. I was hitting star 9 several times. I don't know what's going on with dispatch, but if it could please the chair, I'd like to actually submit a testimony in support for AB 188. May I proceed?
Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman Heidi Kasama, along with the bill sponsors, Senator Orenshaw and Senator Dondera Loop. On behalf of American for Prosperity activists, we strongly urge every member to support AB 188. This creates a right to try for personalized medicine, which parallels that of the original right to try. How is this different? Well, it's pretty simple. Once the FDA ensures basic safety, a terminally ill patient can work directly with their doctor to seek treatment without having to first get government permission. In the personalized medicine context, the safety component would not be the first phase of the clinical trial, but instead would be a set of standardized safety protocols that are the manufacturers and doctor must follow while providing the treatment. And I really want to emphasize that because, Chair, you brought up some great questions in terms of accountability, and I think that with what's currently in the bill helps us achieve that. I think this is a work in progress, but this is definitely a first step in us achieving that without having to compromise individuals who, as many have shared here today, needing to basically fight time and cannot fight bureaucracy. It is a basic human right to fight for one's life. The right to try is saving lives and allowing people to have a say in their own destinies. It is a declaration that people should be able to decide for themselves in consultation with their doctors whether to try medicines that could prolong or even save their lives. And when we talk about doctors, that plays a very, very significant role in comforting Nevadans and making those type of decisions rather than research facilities and some of these entities that do not have their best interest in mind. So we urge you to support this bill and support and pass AB 188. And again, we thank the bill sponsor. We thank everyone that's come forward and testified in support of this bill. And we look forward to providing our support as well. Thank you.
Chair, there are no additional callers to provide testimony at this time.
Thank you so much. Assemblywoman, did you have any closing remarks?
Thank you so much, Chair and committee members, for allowing me, with all my hardworking co-sponsors and everybody that's worked so hard on this bill, to present the bill. And Chair, we will have responses to your concerns to you tomorrow. And please, let's not delay passing this bill this session. We've had no opposition testimony. This is the time that we need to help people. We want to make sure that our regulations are not falling behind the advancements in medicine. This is to keep up with the wonderful advances in medicine that we are having. It is obviously a very personal bill for me as well, with the individualized treatments that have certainly saved my husband, and we want to make sure that everybody has those opportunities. And I thank you all again for allowing us to present this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate your family for joining us as well. And we'll go ahead and close the hearing for this bill. I was scared that I was going to have to call the meeting into a pause for recess, but seeing that all our members are now present, we'll go ahead, if it's okay, to move on to the work session. All right. We have a work session for a few documents. We have AB 11, AB 114, AB 265, and AB 311. Let's start with AB 11. Ms. Rudy.
Thank you, Chair Doñate. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. As LCB staff, I am nonpartisan, so I am just going to walk you through the work session document. I don't advocate for or oppose legislation. Assembly Bill 11 prohibits hospitals or psychiatric hospitals from employing certain physicians for practicing medicine except where expressly authorized by law. Hospitals violating these provisions may have their license suspended or revoked and are subject to certain administrative penalties. The bill exempts hospitals or psychiatric hospitals employing physicians who are participating in specific graduate programs and medical facilities that are owned or operated by the federal or state government, a church, or religious denomination. This bill prohibits hospitals from taking measures to restrict certain activity of healthcare providers whom they employ or who serve as independent contractors, including prohibiting contracts with or taking any action against providers who discuss with others their salary, wages, or working conditions, or who work for another medical facility, and entering into non-competition covenants with providers that prohibit them from providing medical services for other medical facilities. The bill also requires the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Health and Human Services to study the employment of physicians by corporations during the 2023 to 2024 interim, and provides the committee with one additional bill draft for this purpose. There are no amendments.
Thank you so much, Miss Rudy. And we did get questions. Miss Cooper is out today sick, so we have Miss Rudy. It's actually our reunion. She assisted me when I chaired natural resources, so it's nice to have her back. The motion for this one is do pass for AB 11. Do I have a motion?
I'd so move.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Nguyen. Do we have a second? Second from Senator Lang. Moving on to discussion, Senator Titus.
Well done. You knew exactly that process. Thank you, Chair. And I know that this bill is well intended. However, I think it's going to have a dramatic adverse effect on healthcare in the state, especially when we so desperately need providers. I will be a no on this, and I will continue to be an advocate to not let this bill pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Titus. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly wish Destiny Godspeed in feeling better. In Nevada, we have a significant shortage of medical specialists, and many doctors today find it very challenging to go into private practice and pay rent and the personnel issues, the malpractice issues. For many of them, it's just easier to work for an entity like a hospital. I believe that this bill, if it passes into law, is going to limit the number of medical specialists that we have that are working in Nevada that are employed by hospitals to provide for very specialized care. I worry this is going to do the opposite of what the intentions of this bill are trying to do, and for those reasons, I have to remain opposed to the bill.
Thank you so much. Any other comments? Moving on to the vote. All those in favor of AB 11, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Nay. We have an opposition from Senator Titus and Senator Stone. The motion's carried, and I will sign that floor statement to myself. Let's move on to Assembly Bill 114. Ms. Rudy.
Thank you, Chair Doñate. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 114 revises the membership of the Nevada Early Childhood Advisory Council. The bill also defines the term early childhood program for purposes of the duties of the council as any program for children less than 8 years of age pertaining to nutrition, healthcare, mental and behavioral health protection, and play and learning to stimulate a child's development. Chair Doñate proposes the following amendments to Nevada Revised Statutes 432A.076. It's to delete Section 1P of that statute, which is the phrase, who is recommended by the Nevada Indian Commission in consultation with the Intertribal Council of Nevada, Inc., or its successor organization. The intent is to resolve a conflict with similar provisions in AB 463 currently pending. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rudy, the motion for this one is amend, do pass.
So move, amend, and do pass.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Nguyen, second from Senator Titus. Any discussion? Moving on to the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. I'll go ahead and assign that floor statement to Senator Nguyen. Let's move on to Assembly Bill 265. Ms. Rudy.
Thank you, Chair Doñate. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 265 creates a statewide mental health consortium to represent existing regional mental health consortia for the purposes of promoting the mental health of children. The bill prescribes the duties, membership, and powers of the statewide mental health consortium and allows the statewide mental health consortium and each regional mental health consortium to request the drafting of one legislative measure within the scope of the statewide or regional consortium as applicable. Finally, the bill adds 2 members of the statewide mental health consortium to the subcommittee on the mental health of children of the Commission on Behavioral Health. There are no amendments.
Thank you so much. For this one, it's a motion of do pass. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Vice Chair Nguyen's motions, second from Senator Titus. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried, and I'll go ahead and assign that floor statement to Senator Titus, if that's okay. And let's move on to Assembly Bill 311.
Thank you, Chair Doñate. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 311 authorizes a hospital to enter into an agreement with the Armed Forces of the United States, allowing unlicensed federal medical providers and surgical technologists to provide care in the hospital if they are operating in their official capacity and within the scope of practice authorized by the federal government and part of a training or educational program. The bill exempts such providers from licensure and regulation requirements of certain health professionals in Nevada. There are no amendments.
Thank you so much. The motion for this one is do pass. Do we have a motion?
Yep. Second.
I don't even know. I will give this motion to Senator Titus, and then a second was from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion's carried. I will go ahead and assign that floor statement to Senator Titus. That concludes our work session for today. We'll move on now to public comment. Is there anyone here in Carson City or in Las Vegas? Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone virtually?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, the lines are open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. That concludes the business of today. We do have a work session scheduled for Thursday. We haven't had any bills sent to us, but as many folks know, things are always in flux. Bills may come. We'll work our way through them. But we will have one on Thursday, and we appreciate everyone for joining us here today, and the meeting's now adjourned.